All right, so a lot of introduction to psychology classes leave memory sort of to the end of the class. But I like to start introduction to psychology with memory because it's stuff that maybe you'll be able to apply early on in the semester to help you do better all throughout the semester, not just in this class, but in other classes too. If we're going to talk about memory, we need to define what it is. So who can tell me what memory is? Yeah, hello. It's an ability to remember things. Does anyone else have anything different? Yeah. So it's not just the ability to remember things, like to retrieve it, it's also the ability to store information. Is there anything else?
Store, retain, and recall.
Store, retain, recall, so these are all memory processes? Good. So if we look at Wikipedia, I like to use Wikipedia. It's a good source. It's not a great source if you want to do hardcore research, but it's a good place to start. And this is an intro class. So Wikipedia sort of gives introductions to different topics, so we're going to use a lot. Anyway, so it says that memory is some type of an ability. It's an organism's ability to store, retain, and recall information and experiences. So in one sense, we have memory as an ability. In a different sense, we can think about memory as information. It's everything that a person can remember, right? Because not only do I have the ability to store information, to learn information, I have memories that are there, right? Information about what happened on my 8th birthday, or what I ate last night for dinner. Pizza, yeah. What did you eat last night for dinner? Suhaila? You ate chicken. Wednesday, what did you eat for dinner last night? Shinsa? What is this? Chicken? Did anyone not eat chicken? What did you eat, Lily's? Potatoes. Okay, so we have this information, and we call those things memories too, right? Oh, precious memories. Oh, let's take a picture. Look at this memory I have. So memory can be viewed as two different types of things. One, as an ability. Second, as information. Notice that these things refer to people. Here's a person, this is an organism, and a person is an organism. We can define memory without referencing people or organisms. We can say it's the capacity to hold information over time, right? That's the ability sort of definition. The capacity to hold information over time. Or the information about past states or events. So my question is, what things have memory? Humans have memory. Good. Do other things have memory? Animals. Why would you say that, Mary? How? They don't have to have memory.
Sometimes they remember their experiences and they take precaution or something. They change their behaviors.
Okay, so sometimes things that happen in the past change what they do in the future, and this shows evidence that there's memory there. Yeah, I would completely agree with you that animals have memories, but I just want to make sure that we're thinking about it right. If you have a dog or a cat, and you get home and it runs up to you, it's showing a memory of you, right? It runs up to you, but it might not run up to your brother or some stranger. But if it knows you and you're good to it, it demonstrates a memory is there, right? How about non-living things? Computers, they have memory, right? Talk about random access memory. It's a type of memory. How about the boards, these Beas Tatas? Do they have memory? Yeah.
Short memory. Smart. When you erase it, it's gone.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It absolutely has a memory. This is a memory. If it didn't have these things here, I would have no idea what class came before me. But I'm guessing, someone actually told me there was a type of math class, but I probably would have guessed a math class anyway. There's some function things, and equal signs, and numbers, probably math, right? So there's a memory. And as Ubedullah said, this is a very delicate memory. It's gone. Well, most of it. We get some wipe off the spray and do an even better job. But it does have the capacity to hold information over time. And that there was a memory here, there was particular information about a past state up there. Does that make sense? So lots of things have memory. Rocks have memory. Not the same type of memory that we do, but if we throw a rock against the ground, it will, chip a little bit. It shows that something happened over time. All right, so, yes?
The three types or three parts of memory, here they're defined a little bit different, but in the definition it says retain and recall. Is it retaining and recalling the same thing?
Retention and recall is a little bit different. So the idea with retention is here. Imagine that, can you get up for a second? So this is his memory, okay? So you're going to give it to me to store it. I'm your brain. Okay, so I have the memory. I'm retaining it. Try to recall it. Come on, get it. So I'm still retaining it. He's trying to recall it, but he's not doing a very good job. Oh, he recalled it. Does that make sense? So the retention and recall is different. The recollection is it's not like you take the memory out again, like in Harry Potter, they're like, oh, here's the memory. It's not like that. It's still there when you recall it. But the retention is if we think about this information, all that a person can remember, that's the stuff that's being retained. And then you go in, you retrieve stuff out of that. Make sense? All right. So we've got three different types of memory. Sensory, short-term, long-term. What is sensory memory? It's related to sensory perception. What did someone say something over here? Okay, you said it was about sense too. How long do sensory memories last? Short time. How short?
Milliseconds.
At the most, it's a second or two. And maybe there's some very unusual circumstances where you have a sensory memory that lasts a long time. If you maybe have someone take a picture of you with a flash, and then you turn around and then you blink and you can still see the flash for a couple seconds, that's a special case where sensory memory lasts extra long. But that's because the stimulus was really, really intense. Most of the time we don't have things that intense. So the sensory memories last usually much, much shorter, often less than a second in time. So it's the sensory memory, it's a brief store for sensory information. What is sensory information?
It's about our senses, sight, hearing.
Yeah, the sensory information is everything that we see. You said hearing, everything that we hear. What else would we have sensory memories for?
Touch.
Things that we feel. Touch, what else? Smells, tastes. Yeah, we have sensory memories for all of these things. It's a brief store for sensory information. How much stuff can it hold? This is the question about capacity. The sensory memory holds basically everything that we could potentially sense in our environment. So, if I position myself just right, I can only, oh man, I'm so bad at things. Suhaila. I'm gonna practice. Okay, so if I position myself right, I can see Suhaila, but I can't see Zainab? Good. But I can't see Zainab, right? So that's not something that's in my sensory memory. But I can see Merve. So even if I'm looking at Suhaila, Merve is in my sensory memory. And lots of other things are too. Rayon is, the video camera is. How many of you guys have had the experience where your mother tells you something? They say like, oh, hey, can you come and do this? And you say, what? And then you say, oh, never mind, never mind. Have you guys done that? Or maybe you say it in Turkish. Ne? Oh. Right? So well, how can you do this? You say what, which suggests that you don't understand what they said. Right? When you said what, you didn't know what they said. So how can you say like, oh, never mind, a second later?
When we hear the whole sentence, we get the idea, the meaning, what the person actually wants. But maybe when we hear the first word, we think that we hear something, but of course it doesn't make sense.
Oh, okay, so there is something to his idea. This is different than what I was looking for. But the idea is that when you get to the end of the sentence, you sort of have a lot of information to work with, and you can sort of piece together things. This is how people might learn a new language. So I might say a new word that you haven't heard before, and you sort of figure out what it means based on the other things that are around it. Does that make sense? But that wasn't what I was looking for. There's a sensory memory explanation too. Imagine that I said, hey, to my wife, hey, could you go to the store and pick up some suyu? And she says, pick up some what? Now, it's not that she didn't understand, right? She like missed that last part. Pick up some what? And then she says, oh, never mind, I got it. How could you do that? Yeah.
She says what? She's thinking that she didn't understand because she doesn't want to do it.
She says what? Because she didn't understand, she wants me to wait?
Because she doesn't want to do it in she's brain, she thinks that she didn't understand what you said.
Oh, this is a sort of very like Freudian approach. So she didn't hear because like she didn't want to do it. Sort of like you see the things that you want to see and you don't. So when my wife asked me to take out the trash, I don't hear her. But if she asks me if I want pizza for dinner, I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, there might be something with that too. But there's a sensory memory explanation. Like we hear the last word, honey, could you go get me some suyu? Give me some juice. And she says, what? But juice is still ringing in her sensory memory. It's still there, very, very briefly. But because it's still there, she can go, oh, there it is, grab it. And say, oh, juice, never mind, I got it. Does that make sense? That's actually evidence of this sensory type memory. Our ability to pick up on things that we don't think we've seen, and then we realize that we've seen it just a split second later. Yeah.
Isn't it like the same thing that the memory is there, the word is there, but the receiver was not able to process this information until like some seconds later?
Well, if it's some seconds later, then that's a problem for the sensory memory because the sensory memory isn't lasting seconds. But your explanation, if you say that you're busy working on the rest of the sentence, you're busy processing that. I mean, think about it. When I say suyu, your brain is processing the stuff that came before it, right? Your brain is busy processing that. So if you didn't have the sensory memory, your brain is busy processing one thing, it would lose the ability to grab and process the next. But because you have that sensory memory, you're able to get that out. Does that make sense? So the explanation is exactly right if you put it on a millisecond time scale or up to a maximum of like a second time scale, not seconds. Make sense? Normally lasts less than a second. So here's an example. Now, this is a picture, and the same picture is being shown every time, except there's one change, there's one difference, and I can't see where it is right now. Oh, I see it, I got it. So I would like you to raise your hand when you can see the difference. Now, notice that there's a blank in between, right? Why do we put this blank in? If we didn't have this blank, it would just look like the thing is appearing and disappearing, like a light's turning on and off, right? By introducing the blank, we give the sensory memory time to disappear. So the sensory memory for that previous thing that was there is gone. Do you see it? Yeah, don't say what it is. How many people see it? Now once you see it, if you look away, is it easy to see it again? Yeah, once you know what it is, it's like, oh yeah, duh, it's really easy to see.
Is it like many pictures or simple?
No, there's one thing that's changing.
So
You saw it? Saw it? Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's in this part of the picture. How many people still haven't found it?
No.
Okay, it's in this part of the picture.
Yes.
Yes. Now, if instead of having this blank, if we just had, this flower head pop on and off, we'd all say, oh yeah, it's like a light blinking. But because we introduced this blank, the sensory memory disappears and you don't have access to what was there just a second ago to compare it against to see what's changed, right? So what you have to do is sort of look at one thing at a time. Okay, there's a rabbit. Is the rabbit's ears changing? We're attending to it, right? It's not just something that's there, but now we've attended to it, we're doing something different with it. Okay, the rabbit's ears, no, they haven't changed. Has that changed? No, right? So we go sort of piece by piece looking for things, which brings us to working memory. So what's working memory?
Short-term memory.
Yes, that's another word for working memory is short-term memory. Good. In short term, what does that suggest about the duration of working memory?
Very short.
It's short. How short?
Maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute.
Seconds? I hear someone say 30 minutes. Did anyone say minutes?
A minute, maybe.
Sorry, what did you say?
It's several seconds to a minute.
A couple seconds to a minute.
But could it be programmed?
What do you mean could it be programmed?
Like it could be seconds, it could be minutes. We talk about memory things.
Ooh, so like if we're thinking about like computer memory, it could be a couple seconds or it could be minutes or hours.
Depending on your purpose, like.
Yeah, the working memory can last as long as you're working with it. Once you stop working with it, it's only a couple seconds. The experiments suggest about 3 seconds. So the sensory memory is lasting milliseconds, maybe a second at most. The short-term memory can last indefinitely as long as you're working with it. But once you're not working with it, only a few seconds. So what does it mean to work with something? Working. Yeah, there's this like active processing idea, right? I'm not just like letting it sit there. So the stuff in sensory memory, all of this stuff is coming in, but I'm only like actively paying attention to a few things. Like if a student raises their hand, then I'll focus in on that student, right? So the working memory is the stuff that we're working on. And how much stuff can we work on at one time? How much stuff can we hold in our working memory? Not much at one time. How much? So a lot of people got this right on the quiz.
Oh, 7 minus or plus 2?
Yeah, it was 7 plus or minus 2. 7 plus or minus 2. So if going from 5 to 9, that's sort of like the average range. But yeah, 7 plus or minus 2. Does anyone know how they figured this out? I don't know if this was in the reading or not. So your phone numbers. How long are your phone numbers? 10?
11?
10? 11?
Even it's 9.
The like landlines, how many numbers are those? I mean, they're all like 216, right? So you know the original ones. Back when telephones were first invented, very few people had them, right? So you can pick up the receiver and talk to the operator, and you say, "Hi, can you get me, who haven't I said in a while? What was your name? Was it Iram? Sumeye. Who is Iram? You're Iram. Okay. Sumeye. I'd like to talk to Sumeye. So then the operator patches us through, right? But then lots of people start using it, and the operator can't handle everyone, so we start using numbers, right? So how many numbers should we use to represent a person's phone number, to uniquely identify a person? So the telephone companies did a lot of research, and the telephone companies were the ones that discovered this 7 plus or minus 2. And they did this by giving people numbers to remember. Okay, Irem, I want you to remember a couple numbers, all right? 2, 7, 6, 8. Okay, so she can remember 4. All right, you're Begum, right? Yeah. All right, so I'd like you to remember some numbers. 1, 3, 7, 9, 2, 8, 6, 5, 4.
I just remember 1.
1, 3, 7, 9, I don't remember that. But they did this. They gave some people like 1 number and 2 numbers and 3 numbers and 4 numbers and 10 numbers and 12 numbers to see how many numbers on average people could remember. if you get them like this shortly. Why is this important? It's important because when like people were first using phones, they didn't have iPhones where you could just like program it in. Oh, hey, what's your name? Oh, what's your number? Oh, there it is. It's in their memory, right? So you had to remember things. So mine is Beshu Zotus Bir Iki Sexan Iki Yirmi Dört Eli Besh. This is smaller numbers. And if you want to remember that, if you don't have a place to write it down, like let's say you go to a bar or a picnic and you meet someone you like and you're like, hey, so you know, what's your phone number? You have to remember this, right? This is important. So it's a good idea to identify how many numbers someone can remember on average. They came up with 7, which is the mean, and then plus or minus 2, which is the standard deviation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Past statistics, you probably already know what that is. So working memory is, again, it's a temporary store for information, but it's for the information that you focus on or process. And unlike the sensory memory, which is taking basically everything in the environment, everything that you can see, hear, taste, smell, is in your sensory memory very briefly, but in the working memory, you've only got 7 plus or minus 2 things, right? So the capacity is much smaller than the sensory memory. It lasts longer. How can you make a working memory last more than a few seconds? So the Atkinson-Shiffrin model says something about how to get memory into long term. What do? You repeat it, right? So does anyone remember my phone number? You do? Did you write it down? What is it?
No, I didn't. 531, 282, 24, 55.
Wow, you have a really good memory. Do you remember it too? Were you guys rehearsing it thinking like, oh, I gotta call Dr. Knapp? I mean, some people are really good with numbers, so that's pretty cool. Wow. But if you guys wanted to remember that and didn't have this amazing ability that they apparently did, or just the luck of potentially remembering, if you wanted to remember that, you could say it to yourself over and over again. It takes me a little bit longer to remember this because I'm saying it in Turkish. I actually don't know what my phone number is in English. I have to like translate it. Okay, so that's 282. But if you keep saying it over again, okay, you can remember it as long as you want. In fact, if you do it enough times, say it, you probably can stop saying it and you'll still remember it later. I remember my phone number, right? It's something that's stored in the long term. So long term, what's this? Well, the name gives some of it away. So long term means what? It means that it's information that's going to be stored for long periods. So previously we talked about sensory memory, which is like milliseconds, second most. Short-term memory, which can last long periods, but only if you keep working on it. And really, if you're not working on it, only a few seconds. How long is a long term? How long? A lifetime. I don't know about a whole lifetime. I can't remember what it was like, you know, on my first birthday.
It depends on what kind of, for example, my name, I can remember it for my lifetime.
But you can't remember it for your lifetime, because you probably learned your name when you were like 3 months old, right?
No.
You learned it day one. But yeah, I mean, in the sense of like your lifetime, how old are you? 19. I'm 35, so 35 minus 19, what, 16? I don't remember anything from when I was 16. Yeah, I think I was a senior in high school that year. Yeah, I almost got in a fight with somebody. Like, I was kind of nerdy. Go figure. A nerdy kid goes and becomes a college professor. But yeah, there was this one bully, he always wanted to fight me, and I finally said, yeah, you know, I'll fight you this one day. And it was great, because when I said, like, I'd fight him, every day before that, he'd, like, push me and punch me. But once I said I'd fight him, he left me alone. I wish I would have done that all my life. Anyway, I remember that, for 19 years, right? I remember that. So for your lifetime, I've been able to remember things. Some things I'm able to remember better than others. I remember when O.J. Simpson was running away from the police after he killed his wife. that was a big deal in America, probably not so big of a deal to you guys. I remember 9/11. Yeah, you guys probably remember lots of different stuff too. But yeah, it's a very large and persistent information store. So we get the information in there and it stays a long time. It might degrade over time, but it can stay a really, really long time. It's highly processed information, and there's no limit that we've discovered for long-term memory. I mean, we have, how many neurons? I don't know if it's in the millions or billions, but it's a lot. And between the neurons, we have even more connections. So there's lots of ways that we can store information. So practically, our memory is limitless. So the duration, minutes to decades, I mean, even seconds potentially. You might have something really important happen and it's not that you're working on it, but you can remember it a second later and remember it decades later. Like I remember waking up and finding out that, who was it, Magic Johnson had AIDS. I remember that. That was a big deal for me too. Okay, so how do we get information into long-term memory? You have this Atkinson-Schiffer model, which says basically what? We have stuff from the outside world, right? The sounds that I'm making, the sounds that the fan up here is making, the sound that Abdullah made when he scooched in his desk. How does that stuff get into memory? I mean, it's in the sensory memory basically automatically, right? But how do we get it out of the sensory memory into something that we can work with? There might be a better word than decode.
Recall.
Encoding.
Encode, okay, how do we encode the information that's out there?
Making sense out of it and connecting it with other things, you know.
How do we do that? This might be like a really easy answer that maybe is too easy, so you're missing it. Possible.
Nature.
Paying attention.
Yes, exactly, paying attention. So right now, I bet there is something that is in your sensory memory that none of you are paying attention to, so it's not going to be in your long-term memory. But if I draw your attention to it, it will go into your working memory, and if you work with it, you can store it in your long-term memory. So right now, I would like you to focus on the feeling of your clothes on your legs. Can you feel like your pants on your legs? Like, can you feel where like the folds are, where like right here I feel like there's like my wallet's pressing into me harder right here. Can you guys feel that? So it's there. So why aren't you like busy like memorizing the way your pants feel all the time? Because you're not paying attention, right? So if you go to class and you want to learn in the class, what do you need to do? What will your teachers say? Pay attention, right? So we have all this information out there in the world, the environmental input, and we need to get it into sensory, or it goes into sensory memory automatically. In order to get it into short-term memory, we need to pay attention to some of it. So if you're busy paying attention to how hungry you feel right now, you're not going to remember this lecture as well as if you're paying attention to the things that I'm saying, right? Okay, so we pay attention to a few things, and we get it in our working memory to work with it. So I say something and you're working with it. Okay, what did he mean by that? Okay, does that fit in? Okay, yeah, got it. Next thing. How do you get it from short-term memory or working memory into long-term memory? It says it up there, you can read. So what does it say?
Rehearse.
You rehearse it. Yeah. So if you rehearse it, okay, there are 3 types of memory. There's sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. Sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. You guys might use note cards, right? This is rehearsal. You're rehearsing it. And that will get it into long-term memory. All right. So to get stuff into memory, we need attention and rehearsal. The question I have, though, is what's the difference between attention and rehearsal? I mean, when you rehearse something and say it again, all you're doing is paying attention to it again, right? You pay attention once, and then you keep paying attention, right? In working memory, if you're working with it, you're continually paying attention to it. That's like rehearsing it. Pay attention to it, pay attention to it, pay attention to it. If you pay attention to it enough, you'll remember it. This is why, for boring classes, not psychology, of course. No, I had a really boring psychology course, and some of you might think that this is really boring. I hope not, but that's okay. If you have a boring subject and you're trying to study, you have to rehearse it a whole lot. You're like, okay, what's this and what's that? Okay, the note cards again. Oh, we got to review again. Oh, and do it a lot of times. But if you really like the subject, if you're really paying attention the first time, you might not have to study that hard later because you paid so much attention the first time. Does that make sense? Like, some people you meet, you have a hard time remembering their name, maybe because you're not paying enough attention. But then you meet the guy or the girl of your dreams and you think, oh, look at them. And you go up and you say, okay, what's her name? Abdullah. And like for the rest of your life, you remember her. But because you paid so much attention to it at that moment, probably not, you're not going to remember a name like that. But important life events, maybe a big birthday party, a special toy that you got, or when you found out that you were coming to Istanbul Shahir University, you paid so much attention to it, you jumped up and down, and you rehearsed it with your mom and your dad, and now it's there in the long term, without having to work very hard. All right, so serial position curve, what's this? I need to go faster.
First and last.
First and last what?
These are the most rememberable or the easily remembered things.
Okay.
First and the last of the list.
Yeah, so if there's a list of information that you have to learn, oftentimes people will remember the stuff at the first and at the end better than they remember the stuff that's in the middle. So if we graph this, here's the amount of words that people recall on a list, and here's the position that it is in the sequence. So these are the first words, these are the last words. You see that people remember the first words pretty well, and often the last words very well too, if you give the test immediately. These different positions of the curve are called different things. So this initial position is called primacy, primary, first things. The last part is the recency effect, because it's the most recent things that you've seen. Now, what type of memory is the primacy portion of the curve thought to index? Long-term memory, yeah. So primacy is related to long-term memory. So this means if we can stop things from getting into long-term memory, we should be able to wipe out that primacy portion of the curve. Does that make sense? If it's really related to long-term memory. So how can we do that? Remember Atkinson and Schifrin, what they said. How does stuff get into long-term memory? You rehearse it, right? According to me, you pay more attention to it, but whatever. So if you can stop people from paying attention to it, or stop people from rehearsing it, we should be able to wipe out this primacy portion of the curve. So if I give people a list of words to remember, blue, dog, chair, green, you might start saying to yourself, okay, blue dog, blue dog, blue dog, blue dog, chair, blue dog, green, right? So you get a lot of practice, a lot of rehearsal for the early ones, and not so much rehearsal for the later ones, right? As we were going around in the circle, I mean, we said Abdullah Bilal like 100 times, and we said, was it Merve who was at the end? No, it was Semra. We said Semra once, right? So we didn't rehearse as much, and that's exactly what you find. If you eliminate or disrupt the rehearsal and attention, this part of the curve goes away. This part, what's this thought to be memory? Short-term, thank you. Yeah, this is thought to be related to short-term memory. How could we test this? How can we see if this part of the curve is really due to short-term memory or not?
You just here.
After some time, we forget it.
After some time we forget it, we just heard it, right? So if I give you the test immediately, then that stuff, you're still working with it, right? So it should be there. In fact, the last item should even be in your sensory memory if I give you the test quickly enough, right? But if I give you a delay, but not just a delay, but I need to stop you from working with the information. So if I give you a list of words to remember, and I say, okay, count backwards by threes from 32, go. So 32, what's next? What's next? 32, 29, is that right? Yeah, 32, 29, 26, 23, 20, 17, right? Count backwards. This is engaging your working memory, right? And you're not able to concentrate on the list items anymore. You do this for a few seconds, boom, you eliminate the recency portion of the curve. Make sense? So,
Is this always true for all people? Say the position.
Maybe we should talk about this, because this will help us potentially eliminate some serial position effects. But I'm going to let you guys go, because class is over. So we'll pick up next class, finish this, and we'll go on to the next study guide. So, ready? Okay, shoot, sorry. So for next class, we're going to go a little bit deeper into memory and talk about study skills, how you should study, where you should study, things like that, so you can really take this initial stuff and apply it to your classes. All right, have a good day. I'll see you Friday. So.